Boiler Upload podcasts are brought to you by Reindeer Shuttle. We know driving to the airport sucks. Let Reindeer Shuttle do it for you. With 5 daily trips to Indianapolis International Airport and 3 to Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, they can do the driving for you from Purdue. With multiple pickup points on campus, they'll take you where you need to go. That's reindeershuttle.com for booking information. Welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the Boiler Upload podcast. We are in our off season right now, so we're trying to come up with a lot of different ideas for content. And with me today is Paul Banks of the Sports Bank in Chicago, noted Illini grad, Michigan State grad. Are you collecting degrees from every Big Ten university or no?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's going to keep me warm this winter, all those degrees.
Yeah. Would you say you need 98 degrees?
Oh, well.
It'll be the hardest thing you ever do. I really should
retort back with a song title, but 98 degree song titles are. There was a video with like the girl from the Doritos ads. That's about all, but I don't remember what the song was.
Well, just look at it this way. It will be the hardest thing that you ever have to do.
Very true, because I want it that way. That's Backstreet. Well, hopefully we can be in sync with each other more with our because there's only one direction this podcast can go.
Yeah, we start at the bottom. Anyway, the reason we have Paul on today is to talk about Big Ten expansion. It is here officially in 13 days. Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA become part of the Big Ten Conference, the Big 18, the Gigantic 10, the Gargantuan 10, whatever you want to call it. What's your preferred terminology there?
I would call this cowboy capitalism or runaway capitalism or capitalism without constraints, where it's just put anyone in, does not matter. I would say just whatever I'd say it's not a conference, it's not a league, it's like a consortium, an arrangement, a partnership for the purpose of like streaming and television rights. Like it's Jay Billis kind of said it more eloquently, and he called it years ago. He said like the concept of leagues or conferences is going to be gone, and it's just going to be this is kind of really egregious, and I don't think the Big Ten is going to do this, but I'm sure you heard about the All-State Big 12 Conference or the All-State.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's I mean, I guess it's just manifest destiny. Seed is shining sea, and it's like, let's say back in Kokomo High School, you had conference games against East Chicago every year.
Well, we already have a spread out conference because the North Central Conference went from Logansport and kind of the pseudo northwest part of the state. It had a Lafayette school. It had a Lafayette school, and then it has Richmond over by the Ohio border. But even that's been changing. All the high school conferences around the state have been changing, and I think the North Central Conference drops. It was at 10 members a few years ago, and now it'll drop down to like 6 this year with a bunch leaving. So even high schools are affected by this. It's ridiculous. And as we know, football is the driving factor in this. Purdue and Illinois, not exactly the strongest football programs throughout history, but Purdue and Illinois are 2 of the 5 original members of the Big Ten that have been members of the Big Ten since it started without interruption since 1896. So how's it feel to be grandfathered into this deal? Because clearly they're not bringing it on for Purdue football and Michigan and Illinois football.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we're like the Billy Madison of programs or something, where we can just sit by the pool and get drunk all day, and we'll still live in a mansion. I guess no. The thing is, like, it's interesting. Football rules everything, and it's sad because men's basketball is that. I mean, we both have had national title game appearances, and well, I don't want to say recent years with Illinois, but
within reason. I mean, like the last 20 years or so.
Well, I mean, we just went to the Elite Eight, and we just what I see kind of happening is NIL money is Illinois is like this sleeping giant for NIL money because we've got like this extremely large alumni base all over the country, and Illinois alumni will put in some money for NIL for football. So football should be at least decent in theory. Illinois fans will put in a lot for basketball. It's just like Purdue; it's a basketball first school. So you'd like to think that you'd get like a rising tide that lifts all boats with all the big money coming in from all these TV deals, being in the league. You'd think maybe basketball, which of course, basketball, everything is all about the tournament. So if you get that tournament success, that gets more visibility, maybe then people start to go look across the street at the other revenue sport, and then that generates interest, and maybe that kind of lifts things up. The other thing it's going to do for us is as much as I make fun of, having a conference rival that's, 2 time zones away, it will be cool to have like that home game against USC or that home game against Oregon or Washington. Like that is fun. Now, to really kind of answer your question, I can't say anything really positive about like what it means in a competitive landscape. Like I kind of feel you guys beat us out in 2022. That was our one shining moment to be in a Big Ten championship game.
Yeah.
And we had it and we just gave it to you. And it's never gonna, that's never gonna, the worst division in all history of Power 5 football. That's never gonna happen again.
Yeah, it is definitely interesting because it almost takes like a special juggling of the schedules right now for a Purdue, an Illinois, or even like a Minnesota, Northwestern, and Indiana to have even a remote amount of hope to get to a Big Ten championship game. You've got to hope that the scheduling gods have you dodge Michigan and Ohio State the same year, probably Penn State. You get a favorable West Coast game because I know this coming season, Purdue does not have a West Coast road trip. However, part of the reason they don't have one of the West Coast road trips is they're already playing a non-conference game at Oregon State. So I'm thinking they probably went to the Big Ten and be like, look, we'll take, because they've got the 4 in a row after this season. They probably went to the Big Ten and be like, look, we're going to the West Coast already this year. Don't send us twice, please.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
But you almost have to just have the right schedule, some dumb luck, 1 or 2 upsets. And that's kind of, I honestly think it's a little bit more absurd to have it this way, because how can you decide a conference championship when you don't even play half the conference? I mean, there's 9 conference games. That means there are 7 teams you're not playing. And if it's the right 7, okay, is Ohio State going to be punished if they happen to play Penn State, Michigan, USC, and Oregon, and they lose 3 of those, but Purdue dodges all of those teams, beats up on the bottom, and, finishes ahead of them? Is that really going to decide things?
Yeah, and that's the other thing I don't understand. What is the actual formal official, now that divisions are gone, what is the setup, and how are they going to determine the title game?
It's the best 2 records. And again, what if you got 3 teams go 8-1? I mean, that's entirely possible now. And
yeah, that's crazy, especially with like the protected rivalries. Like, that's not fair because if you get to play, like if Indiana, you guys do get to play Indiana every year, and they had their one shining moment was 2020, but they blew it. Like they almost got to the title game in that goofy COVID year. But I don't want to say like Northwestern is that anymore, but like if you had like Northwestern in the 90s or the 80s, it's like, well, yeah, that was like your free win.
Yeah, Purdue is in a much better place playing Indiana every year than an Ohio State playing a Michigan every year or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking exactly. That's the exact example I was going to use.
And it's just, to me, it's so absurd. I think it's a little bit more absurd for basketball, just because it's even more unbalanced then. You're down to 3 teams that you're playing every year, home and home, and everybody else is a one play. I mean, I just, because I'm basketball first, and I know you're basketball first, and everything else. It just, I think, it's taken away the value of a Big Ten regular season championship, really, because now it's more luck of the scheduling, luck of the draw. If you don't have, you know, with as good as Purdue has been, especially at home the last few years, you're going to be one of these teams that dodges a trip to Mackey Arena.
Yeah, and you know what? The only positive I see is that it shrinks the Big Ten tournament, because that was getting so absurd that everyone got in, and at least you do have that as a way to get to the. I mean, I hate to say it, but I kind of feel like a Big Ten regular season championship has already been devalued for a while, just because, you know, all the media hype and all the big money is in the NCAA tournament, and then people forget like what you accomplished and like what you did and everything in the regular season. I mean, at least with a conference tournament, you know, it's a banner, it's something. So there's that. But I'm with you. I totally agree. Like, how are you gonna really determine? Yeah, I mean, it's not right, but you know, that's so ingrained in the DNA of this sport that it always has been about debate. That's what they want. They want controversy. Every system is always about, and it's not going to change now with going to 12, because it's going to be, well, who's number 13?
Yeah, and as we know, it's money. I'm looking at an article here. They expect the 7-year deal that they have to distribute between $80 million and $100 million to each school in the Big Ten. And I know, obviously, UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington don't get that full amount yet. I think Rutgers and Maryland are just now getting around to getting their full share for joining, and that is just a really fortunate position for our two schools to be in, just because if they were on the outside looking in, there's no way they would be getting one of these offers right now. But
do you think like your Washington States and your Oregon States are like jealous and they're looking at this like, what the hell?
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, if you're Oregon State and Washington State, they were the two programs kind of left standing, and it's really unfair that happened to them. And you look at a program like Oregon State, not only did they have their conference fall apart for them, they I think we had a cat emergency.
Sorry, Otis was on the porch, which is fine, but then a cicada came and he was getting towards the ledge, so I had to stop him.
Oh, okay.
I don't want him chasing it, and then so I just kind of brought him back in here.
There you go. But as I was saying, if you're Oregon State, you not only had your conference fall apart, but because your conference fell apart, your coach, who is an alum, gets poached by Michigan State. And with him, he takes your starting quarterback. I mean, I'm going to be fascinated to watch what Purdue does against them this year, because that was a pretty good Oregon State team last year, and the whole program just decimated from the top down. How are they going to recover? I mean, they were worried about making a full schedule as recently as like 2-3 months ago.
And, you know, that's why we led with that today. That's why we talked about this first, because everything flows from that. It's about, can you get TV sets, or what TV sets are in your market? And then you go, like, it's terrible. It's like kind of ending meritocracy in a way. I mean, I feel bad for them, but what can you do?
Do you think that there's a world where, say, in 10 years, the situation with all the quote-unquote Olympic sports and basketball becomes so untenable that we see football break away and kind of the conferences reform to where they were? You have the Pac-12 reform in all sports but football, and then football just becomes kind of its own thing, maybe.
That's interesting. I mean, I always wondered why Notre Dame had their friends with benefits thing with the ACC, where they were in every sport except football. They were in the ACC. And I think maybe that kind of, there's something going on there. The economics, the financials, that kind of lends itself to that. Now, I think what you're saying is entirely plausible, but I think what we're going to get to first is like an AFC and an NFC where we already have like a giant SEC, a giant Big 12, a giant Big 10. Maybe there's kind of more absorption with there. Another thing you have to think about is what happens between the Power Five and the Group of Five. Where do we go with that? It's definitely entirely possible, but I wonder how many steps it's going to take with that. And that's the thing about these Olympic sports, about these non-revenue sports. I mean, they mean a lot to the people who are involved in them, but unfortunately, they don't get ratings. They don't draw people to the stadium, and that could end up being like a casualty of it all.
Yeah, I mean, Illinois is the reigning Big Ten baseball champion, and you probably heard very little about that, honestly. And, and that's where you're even seeing more of the stratification. Look at the College World Series right now; it's the ACC SEC Invitational, and that's one sport.
Yeah, like I watched, watching the Big Ten tournament on TV, and you're like, look how empty it is. You're just kind of like, why am I watching this?
And I think you're even seeing the stratification within the Power Five conferences, or now Power Four, really. Look at Purdue last season, 4-8 year, but they had some really good individual players. You had Nick Scorton, their top defender, and Deion Burks, the top receiver on the team. They get poached. Texas A&M gets Nick Scorton in the transfer portal. Oklahoma gets Deion Burks in the transfer portal. And those three magical letters, NIL, is what got him.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I think, if you focus on recruiting and you're all about like recruiting, you're going to have to kind of shift your focus. It's transfer portal recruiting now that matters. And Illinois got the number 2 corner in the transfer portal from Texas. Did I write this guy? I forgot his name already. They also got this guy from UTSA, who's the active leading receiver in all of the nation. So they Otis. So they got a couple of big gets there, but it's just going to be it's going to be pure free agency.
When I'm looking at the Purdue roster right now, it's fascinating to see because they lost a couple of their really good players in Burks and Scorton, but they gained 2 wide receivers from Georgia. And I know that the general consensus is, well, if Georgia recruited them, they've got to be good, even if they didn't put up any numbers. So,
yeah, just ask Luke Ford about that. Luke Ford was the number 2 rated recruit in the state of Illinois or something, and went to Georgia and did nothing. And then he went to Illinois, and then he's like, oh, he's declaring for the draft. I'm like, well, good luck with that. It's not. What did you have? 10 catches at Illinois?
But when you mention free agency, it's going so many ways because you've got guys that are like Division II, Division III stars. They may take their shot at like a Purdue for 1 year, see if that improves their draft prospects. You got, with MAC guys doing the same thing where, they may have a fantastic year in the MAC and they may jump to an Indiana, a Northwestern, just to see how they do against the bigger competition. But then you also have the guys, well, I'm 3rd on the depth chart at Georgia. I'm going to go somewhere where I can play and show my talent off because, again, I might get noticed. So in the long run, do you see things kind of evening out in that regard where it does maybe level the playing field at least a little bit?
The biggest concern was always that once you get into NIL and you start to professionalize things, like the classic example was if you go to Northwestern and then they arrange a helmet signing thing or like an autograph session for you, and it's Northwestern, so you'll probably draw like, I don't know, 200-300 people maybe to come to that. You do the same thing at Ohio State and you'll probably get 10,000. So people are just like, it's going to be an arms race. It's the rich are going to stay richer. It's just going to be the same thing. And that really hasn't exactly happened. I mean, we do kind of see like a lot of Ohio State and Alabama at the top of the recruiting rankings every year and everything, but it's definitely something that I think people really don't know what's going to happen quite yet. I think you have a good point. I think you have a couple of great points, actually, that there are ways around it, just like it would be in the pros, that you could, be, the face of the Kansas City Royals franchise and be like the guy that everyone comes to the ballpark to see, versus then you go to the Yankees and you're just, whatever, just another dude in the lineup. So,
because I think that's where you're going to have to be if you're a Purdue or an Illinois. Is you're going to have to hit the portal for those guys from the lower levels, as well as the guys that may have been solid recruits, but just aren't playing for a higher level program right now. And that's appears to be what Ryan Walters is doing at Purdue right now, because he's got some he got at least 2 receivers from Georgia. He's had a couple of other SEC guys come in and be starters this past season, but he's also not afraid. I think he's got an offensive lineman coming from Franklin College, it was a defensive end from Franklin College, and it's just a guy that tore up a Division III league, and he's got an extra year of eligibility, and he saw a spot where he's like, I'm going to see what I can do at the higher level of competition. And if you've got a coach that can do that enough, I can see where that is a huge benefit, don't you?
Yeah, I think it shows that it's mobility, that you don't have to constantly win these recruiting battles coming out of high school, that you don't have to be focused on stacking recruiting class after recruiting class, that you're just not, it's not like you have to like dig in for some long rebuilding plan. Everything can be more flux. And I think that's definitely an advantage for everybody. And, I do like, I'm a fan of all these guys getting paid and getting what they want. And it's great they have that mobility, but there's always like something like the ReliaQuest Bowl. I mean, this was like the first time in the era of bowl game opt-outs, whereas an Illini fan, you had to watch, your top players sit out, because we haven't been relevant in that era. Like, the last time we were in like a New Year's Day bowl was like Jeff George or some crap. And, people kind of, I think opt-outs didn't really begin until Christian McCaffrey or Leonard Fournette. Like they're kind of like the first two. And I still say if Chase Brown would have played, we would have beat those cowbell ringing bastards.
Well, at least you had a close game. I know Purdue, the year they win the West, they go to the Big Ten title game. I mean, arguably, they were a play or two from getting the Rose Bowl bid, because that year Penn State went to the Rose Bowl, and Purdue was leading them in the final minute of the game in the season opener, to where if they do win that game, they're arguably the number 3 team in the conference. And I think they may have been picked for the Rose Bowl, because I know both Ohio State and Michigan went to the playoff. So, Purdue almost ends up in the Rose Bowl, but then they lose the Big Ten title game. They lose Jeff Brom to Louisville. Aiden O'Connell opts out. Charlie Jones opts out. And suddenly you're playing an LSU team whose backups have always been, very highly recruited. And you're playing an LSU team with your second string quarterback that's barely played in his career. Almost no receivers. I believe you had a defensive end opt out. I mean, the opt outs just decimated Purdue. And shoot, you even had the coach opt outs. They had to tag in Drew Brees to coach for a game. And it was the predictable result, a 63-7 loss to LSU that it counts as a bowl appearance, but certainly doesn't feel the same way. And that, I feel like there's so many bowl games that are going that way, and I'm wondering if we're going to start to see bowl games themselves go to the side.
Yeah, a classic example of that would have been NIU's bowl appearances under Rod Carey. Like, for whatever reason, Rod Carey just didn't prepare the team, or just did not care. And you have to really feel sorry for people that like make their vacations around it and pony up the dough to go down there, and that's the showing you get. I mean, yeah, 63-7. Like, my God.
And it wasn't even that close. It was so bad that a third or fourth string cornerback for LSU had a 100-yard pick six on like the second to last play of the game. And I don't fault the kid because it's like one of the few times in his career he gets to play, and he's got an open field ahead of him. So of course he's going to try and score. But that was just a summation of the game where Purdue's fourth string quarterback throws a 100-yard pick six to a fourth string defensive back, and that wasn't football. That game was over in the second quarter, and like you said, people putting their vacation around this. It was ridiculous.
The worst bowl game I think of all time would have been the COVID quasi season, the COVID sort of season, Cotton Bowl. I think it was LSU in Florida. And I think one of the teams literally had their first 8 wide receivers injured or opt out. Or maybe it was Oklahoma. It was a blowout, but it's not the blowout that made this bowl game so terrible. It was the fact that, like, the number of opt-outs and injuries where you're like, this is such a joke. Like, what?
And that happened to Purdue the year before. They played Tennessee in the Music City Bowl and ended up winning in overtime. But they had George Karlaftis and David Bell, the receiver of the year and defensive end of the year in the league, and number one first-round draft pick for the Chiefs. Both of them opted out of the bowl game, and I think that's one of those games that is pretty special for Purdue fans because they had those opt-outs and still won the game. I mean, at one point, due to injuries, opt-outs, and everything, we had receivers running routes that I had no idea who the hell they were, and I'm paid to cover the team.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I got some press release about Illini night at the St. Louis Cardinals, and they're like, they mentioned 3 guys are going to be signing autographs. I'm like, I've never heard of these guys. And they're like, blah, blah, blah is throwing out the first pitch. I'm like, I cover the team. I went to the school. Who? Lake. So, while it is professional sport, quasi-professional sports in a way now, it's really not they're not really stars that are celebrities. Maybe more so in basketball, because, like, I know your favorite player of all time, just like the favorite player of every Big Ten team not named Illinois, Coleman Hawkins.
He got $2 million in NIL. How did he get $2 million in NIL from Kansas State?
Because in basketball, that's what they've always said. In basketball, you see the guy's face, you see his arms, you see his tattoos. He's recognizable. You see him outside walking around campus or the town or whatever. You're like, hey, that's Coleman Hawkins. Especially him, because he's got like goofy hair and he's melodramatic and he like acts weird and he talks crap on Twitter. So he's very visible. And I think that when you have someone who's visible and a personality, that you can sell that with NIL. With football, buried under a helmet, can't really tell who the guy is, like, unless only the skill positions get like hype and coverage. So,
Now,
tough.
how long has Brad Underwood been at Illinois now?
2017.
2017? Okay. Because I've talked about it on some other podcasts that I've been guests on lately. I feel like Matt Painter is also a kind of a dinosaur and a throwback in that regard. He's still relying heavily on recruiting high school and building from within. He's not afraid to go to the transfer portal, but he will only add a guy that he thinks is a really, really good fit, and probably usually just one guy at a time. This past year, Lance Jones was that guy. I mean, just a gigantic pickup. And if I'm going to be honest, I think Lance Jones is a huge reason Purdue made a Final Four, just because of what he brought to the team. But he also doesn't lose his guys. He did lose Ethan Morton and Mason Gillis here in the transfer portal this year, but I kind of don't count those just because they were guys that already played 4 years in West Lafayette. They're exercising their free COVID year that nobody else is going to have going forward. So, they knew the whole time that they were going to be leaving. Painter recruited like they were going to be leaving, so it wasn't exactly a shock. The only one that was kind of a shock was Cannon Catchings, and that, to me, was one of the bigger surprises here. What do you know about that situation?
I know that there's a lot of drama involved, and I know that the families have been rather dramatic, and there's been some noise on social media, but that's about it.
Because here's a guy that had been committed to Purdue for 2 years, and he opts out of his NIL or no NLI. Yeah, there's too many acronyms.
National Letter of Intent.
Yes, National Letter of Intent. He opts out of it on the eve of moving to campus, and to me, that was just so shocking because did you really think that Matt Painter was suddenly going to be different? I mean, Matt Painter, everybody knows what he's doing. He's one of the most established coaches in college basketball. You know how he builds a program. You know you have to earn your spot. And did you really think you were just going to walk onto campus and be like, okay, things will be different for me?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I was happy that Painter did get to a Final Four because, I've seen all the crap he takes from the fan base, and I've seen everything that, through your social media and through all your websites, I've seen the reactions that he gets from the fan base. So I was happy, for him to reach that level given what he does. And absolutely, like, why did this guy think Painter was going to be any different? Why did he think it could be just, I think this kid is probably, it's, to quote Homer Simpson, like, and it's society's fault because we had that 5-star recruit point guard who's now at Louisville, who started out at Kentucky and transferred every high school as well, and transferred colleges 3 times already. I think I can't. Sky Clark, that's his name.
Okay.
I think when you get these guys, I think maybe they just were surrounded by too many people that told them they were the next Michael Jordan. They are the second coming of LeBron or whatever. And people get in your ear, and then you start to get. That's what I'm saying. It's not really their fault to an extent because if everybody has told you you're X, Y, and Z, then maybe you start to believe it before having to go out and prove it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And Painter had the opposite effect with NIL. I mean, he was able to get Zach Edey to come back for another year, and obviously it worked out very, very well. But from everything that I have heard, NIL was a major factor in him not going to the draft last year. And arguably, he made more money at Purdue this year than he could have as a second-round draft pick in the NBA last year. That's insane.
Yeah. I think he. I know I read that he was the number 1 NIL earner in the nation, and you have to wonder, I have to feel sorry for these guys from yesteryear. I mean, you could have gotten paid. And when I was at Michigan State, there was a pizza joint that you could order this. It was called the Mateen Meal Combo. And I don't think Mateen Cleaves got a cut of that. I don't know how he would. It was, 25 years ago or whatever. But he should. I mean,
yeah.
The jerseys is the big one. The infamous Chris Webber moment in the 30 for 30 and the Kane Coulter, court case, people trying to argue against that. It's like, no, dude, if it's a Northwestern number 12 jersey, it's a Kane Coulter jersey. If it's a Michigan number 5, well, 5 did you want? 4. Yeah, if it's a Michigan number 4, it's a Chris Webber jersey, period.
Yeah, how much does a Drew Brees fetch on the open market? As much as he, I was at Purdue when he was playing, and he could have made so much money just doing even local commercials for car dealerships and everything.
PJ Fleck at the last Big Ten media day that I went to, PJ Fleck was saying how much he loves John Deere. He's just into John Deere mowers, how much he would have loved that, because NIU is out in the middle of farm country. That would have been good for him. He was talking about how at Minnesota, it's a Twin Cities. There's all kinds of different things going on. Speaking of money and things being all about money, have you seen how much it's going to cost to go to a Northwestern home game? Not at Wrigley Field, not for that portion of the schedule, but the Lakeside Field.
I have not. First of all, what is the capacity of that stadium?
I believe it's about 2,500. Well, maybe is that? No, let me see. It's they're saying 15,000, but the reason I think 2,500 are the end zones. This is going to be a stadium where the format if you're sitting along the sidelines, like that's tiny. That's very little. You're going to have, I think, 6,000 in each end zone. So a big bulk of the stadium is going to look like that. And the cheapest ticket I see on the chart starts at $400
For one game or for the season?
for one game.
Oh, goodness gracious.
And for that one, you do not have to make a contribution to their fund. For all these other games, you have to pay for you've got some here where the contribution is bigger than, well, most of them. The contribution is bigger than the ticket price. Prime sideline seat is $5,600 plus an $8,000 contribution. South Premium is $1,300. So yeah.
See, I find this fascinating. I brought up their schedule. You got Miami of Ohio, Duke, Eastern Illinois, Indiana as their first couple of home games for the season. So those, Ryan Field, New Trier High School, wherever the hell they would play those would not be big crowds. Wisconsin and Ohio State have to come play there this year.
Ohio State is in Wrigley, and I think, yeah.
Oh, the Ohio State game's at Wrigley?
Yeah, Illinois and Ohio State are at Wrigley. I think a third one is. I think Wisconsin is in Green Bay. So they just decided, well, the hell with it. We'll give you our home game. And they moved it to Green Bay. And at the risk, I guess maybe I am secure enough in my intelligence that I'll admit I fell for the April Fool's Day prank about the college football game being played on an aircraft carrier. Did you hear about this?
Yes, I did. I think I did see that. Yes.
And I looked at the graphic. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. FIU and an aircraft carrier. And that, because things are so weird these days. I mean, there's so many gimmicks. I was like, well, I don't know. They probably figure it out. They put
you're telling me two MAC schools, if somebody came to them to say, we're going to give you $20 million to split to play a game on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, you're telling me that they wouldn't try to figure out a way to play that?
Exactly. And I just don't know why they're not setting up something in Lake Michigan, like the Wrigleyville rooftops in Lake Michigan on some type of giant boat for this and sell those tickets. Because also, there really is, to sound like a true suburbanite, there is nowhere to park. That is going to be they're actually putting the seats over one of the big parking lots, and you've got one big garage, but then that's it. And for $15,000, I don't know. It just seems like they really did not think this through.
Well, what happens if the Cubs make the world? Never mind. That ain't going to happen. Well, all right. On that note, we could probably start wrapping this up. Been some good discussion here on the state of the Big Ten and everything. So what do you have going forward here, Paul? What are you working on now as we get ready for football season, the expanded gargantua Big Ten?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens at Northwestern with the AD search. Derek Gragg was an unpopular choice from the beginning. He was and then when all the scandal broke, he was kind of like Silent Sam or Silent Stan or whatever on all of it. So I had to wonder how long he was going to last. He's not being fired, though. He's being kicked upstairs to a less meaningful role. I've been looking to see who's going to come in. I don't know. I think David Braun was a great hire. I mean, he's young, scrappy, and hungry, and he proved that, and he made them a lot better. With Illinois, I'm working on, are we going to have the old school 80s style passing attack again? Are we going to be real fun with you're going to have to outscore. I mean, the defense last year's team was so mediocre. I don't really know if you could say the offense was the stronger part. They kind of were. This year, it's pretty clear. This year, the defense is going to really be the weaker link. So you're going to have to just outshoot people. Might be fun to watch. So I'll be working on that. And in addition to the sports bank, I have been working at Ravens Wire, the Baltimore Ravens the NFL Wires page for USA Today. So at Ravens Wire, and have an exclusive with TJ Tampa coming up, one of their rookies that they drafted this year.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we do have Purdue at Illinois on October 12th, my 45th birthday this year.
If this were the medieval if this were the Dark Ages or medieval times, you'd be a senior citizen.
I already feel like a senior citizen most days, but that is 6 days before Oregon comes to West Lafayette. So right in the heart of Big Ten country and Big Ten schedule, Purdue has to go to Illinois. Always a fun game. I like going over to Chambana. Is Chambana offensive to you Illinois people or no?
No, I don't even think about it. I've heard that term. I've never used it. It's like, I guess, like Chicagoland.
We got the region.
Like, ooh, go to Chicagoland, the amusement park. Well, right.
All righty. Well, thank you very much for being on the show, Paul. We will be at you. We'll be talking to you hopefully later in the summer. Maybe have you back on as a guest just to see what kind of programming we get. So for Paul, I am Travis Miller, and this has been the Boiler Upload Podcast.